Lieutenant struck him in the jaw, then learned too late what a Navy SEAL can really do. They said he was too quiet, too polite, too old school for a new Navy that measured men by loudness instead of weight of silence. But on that humid morning at Coronado, when the lieutenant's fist connected with his jaw, the room learned what quiet could do when provoked by arrogance. The gym smelled of salt and disinfectant, of sweat soaked deep into rubber mats that had seen every kind of pride broken on them. Sailors stood in a circle, their faces glistening, their breath held. Lieutenant Cross, tall, clean-shaven, a fresh graduate with a chest full of theories, walked the mat like a stage. In front of him stood Chief Petty Officer Daniel Rourke, mid-30s, lean, tanned, the kind of man whose presence didn't announce itself but rearranged the air. His uniform was faded, his boots scuffed, his sleeves rolled tight around sinewed arms marked by old scars. He didn't look like much. Not to them, not to Cross. "Chief," the lieutenant said, his voice carrying the sharpness of someone who'd never been challenged. "You ready to show the recruits how not to embarrass themselves?" Rourke just nodded once. Cross smirked, turning to the crowd. "Men, this right here is your example of experience. And I'll show you why experience means nothing if you can't keep up with reality." The laughter was nervous, uncertain, the sound of young sailors taking their cues from rank instead of reason. From the doorway, the Master Chief watched, arms crossed, eyes narrowing. He'd seen this kind of arrogance before, the kind that didn't survive first contact with humility. Rourke didn't speak. He adjusted his footing slightly, a quiet gesture that said everything. Years of SEAL training were buried in that stillness, but Cross only saw silence as defiance. He stepped forward. "Let's make it interesting," he said, stripping off his jacket. Hand to hand. No formality. Just truth. The room tensed. Someone exhaled sharply. Rourke met his gaze. Calm. Patient. "Sir," he said softly, "I don't think you want to do that." Cross smiled, mistaking kindness for weakness. "Oh, I really do. Daniel Rourke wasn't born into toughness. He'd earned it the long way, brick by brick, through nights spent cleaning docks in Norfolk, saving every dollar for enlistment, through losing his brother to a roadside bomb in Kandahar while Daniel was still in Bud S. He'd buried grief under silence, not medals. He had been the quiet one in every room, the man who never bragged about operations that never made headlines, the one who patched the holes others made, the kind who stayed late to clean his gear even after 17-hour missions. So when he was assigned to training duty, it felt like punishment. Sitting through PowerPoints instead of firefights, guiding men who didn't yet understand what the word brotherhood cost. Lieutenant Cross was one of those men, a product of classrooms, not chaos. The kind of officer who thought leadership meant volume. That morning, Rourke had hoped to get through another session without conflict. But fate, as always, loved irony. The recruits had gathered early, eyes wide, waiting for the new motivational demonstration. Rourke had stood back, letting Cross speak. He'd listened to the same monologue, about grit, about being a warrior, about how biology had limits but confidence didn't. He could have stopped it. But he didn't. Because sometimes truth only lands when pain delivers it, and so, as Cross squared up in front of him, trying to make an example, Rourke's jaw tightened once, not in fear, but in quiet understanding. He'd been here before. The faces were always new, but the lesson never changed. Across the mat, the recruit shifted uneasily. They could feel something under the lieutenant's smirk, a storm rising in the stillness. And somewhere in that silence, Rourke thought of his brother, of the day they'd said goodbye at the airfield. "You can't teach humility, Danny," his brother had said. "Only life can." That line would echo again, right before the fist came. It happened too fast for anyone to process. One moment, the lieutenant was pacing, lecturing about reaction time. The next, his fist shot forward, connecting with Rourke's jaw. The sound cracked like a gunshot across the gym. The recruits froze. A few flinched. One whispered, "Jesus Christ." Rourke staggered a half step, then stopped. His head turned back slowly. His eyes, an ocean gray, unshaken, locked onto Cross. There was no rage. No surprise. Just disappointment. Cross stood there, chest heaving, adrenaline and ego mixing in his blood. "That's what hesitation gets you, Chief," he said, voice dripping with pride. "You freeze, you lose." The room was dead quiet. Rourke straightened. His hand came up, touched the edge of his jaw, then dropped back down. He exhaled once through his nose. "Permission to demonstrate, sir?" Cross laughed. Permission granted. What followed wasn't violence. It was clarity. Rourke moved. Not fast, but precise. His left hand redirected Cross's next punch before it even formed. His right stepped in, breaking the officer's stance without visible effort. A twist, a shift in weight, and the lieutenant was off balance. Rourke didn't hit him. He just moved him. In a way that said everything words never could. Cross's body hit the mat, not hard but humiliatingly clean. The recruits gasped. Rourke stood over him, silent, offering a hand to help him up. Cross ignored it, face red, scrambling to his feet. "You think that proves anything?" he barked. Rourke's eyes softened. "No, sir. Just physics." He turned to leave. But Cross, young, proud, and burning, made the worst decision of his life. He swung again, and this time Rourke didn't hold back. It wasn't brutality. It was art. Rourke caught the punch midair, guiding it aside like he'd been waiting for it. His body turned, her hips, shoulders, precision, and in one motion the lieutenant's balance vanished. Rourke stepped inside, used the officer's momentum, and the next thing anyone saw was Cross face down, his wrist pinned behind him in a lock that could have shattered bone with another inch. The sound in the gym wasn't noise anymore. It was breathing. Every recruit had gone silent, watching something primal. Respect earned, arrogance humbled. Rourke leaned down close enough for Cross to hear. "Sir," he said, quiet but firm. "You never hit someone just to prove you can." Cross tried to struggle, but pain answered before Rourke did. The chief eased off, releasing him gently, almost kindly. Then he stood, adjusting his sleeve, stepping back. "Training's over for today," he said to the recruits. Class dismissed. They didn't move, because every one of them had just seen something that would outlive the bruises. The moment when control looked like mercy. The Master Chief finally stepped forward, breaking the silence. "You all right, Chief?" Rourke nodded. "Yes, Master Chief." He looked back at the lieutenant, who was still kneeling, eyes glassy with a mixture of shock and pride shattered. Rourke didn't smirk, didn't speak again. He just offered his hand once more, the same one that had held him down seconds ago. Cross hesitated, then took it. It was that handshake, quiet, unscripted, and full of realization. That began the real training. And for the first time that morning, the lieutenant understood. Some lessons don't come from command. They come from character, but the story wasn't over. Because the next day, Rourke's past would come back to test that character in a way no punch ever could. That night the gym lights were off, but the memory of the slap still hung in the air. Rourke sat alone on the pier behind the barracks, his boots dangling over dark water that smelled like rust and salt. The moon rippled across the bay, painting his reflection in silver shards. He rolled his jaw once, the faint ache a reminder that pain was still an honest teacher. He'd taken far worse, but this one wasn't about injury. It was about restraint, about what it took not to destroy someone who didn't know better. In his pocket he kept a photo, his brother Mark in desert fatigues, one arm around him, the other holding a half-broken guitar. Two kids who thought bravery meant not being scared. They learned too late that bravery meant being scared anyway. "Miss you, brother," Rourke whispered. The wind answered in quiet ripples. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. "Lieutenant Cross, Chief," he said quietly. "No swagger now. Just a man who'd looked in a mirror and seen himself for the first time. "I owe you an apology," Rourke didn't turn. "For what?" "For being an ass. For hitting you. For thinking rank made me stronger." Rourke finally looked over his shoulder. Cross's face was different, humbled. Younger somehow. "You didn't need to apologize," he said. "You needed to understand," Cross nodded. "I do now." Rourke gestured to the water. "Sit." The two men sat in silence, the kind that heals instead of divides. "You ever lose someone, Lieutenant?" Rourke asked. Cross hesitated. "My father last year. Heart attack. I thought I had time." Rourke nodded slowly. "We all think that. Until one day we don't." For the first time, Cross didn't answer like an officer. He just listened. The next morning, Cross arrived early. His jaw was still bruised, but something deeper had shifted. He walked straight into the Master Chief's office and asked for Rourke's record. "Why?" the Master Chief asked. "I want to know who I hit," Cross said quietly. The file was thin. Too thin. Half of it was redacted. Whole pages blacked out like secrets buried under classified ink. But what wasn't blacked out was enough to gut him. Chief Petty Officer Daniel Rourke, SEAL Team 5. Decorations, Silver Star, Navy Cross pending review, 3 commendations for valor. Notations, Operation Phoenix Gate, survivor of Blackwater Ridge ambush, 12 KIA, 1 MIA Lieutenant Mark Rourke. Cross froze on the last line. Same last name. He read it twice. 3 times he stood there, the weight of realization pressing down like a vice. He hadn't hit a washed-up instructor. He'd struck a legend, and a man who'd already lost more than any rank could ever command. Later, on the training field, Cross watched Rourke working with the recruits. No yelling, no theatrics, just patient correction. A guiding hand here, a calm nod there. It was leadership that didn't announce itself. The kind that left no bruises but left an imprint that lasted forever. And for the first time, Cross felt small in the right way. He walked up quietly. "I read your file, Chief." Rourke didn't pause. "You shouldn't have." "I had to," Cross said. "I needed to understand why you didn't fight back harder." Rourke looked at him then, eyes steady. "Because I already fought all the fights that mattered." That night, as rain tapped the tin roof of the barracks, Rourke dreamed of Afghanistan again. He was back in the valley, smoke, dust and gunfire painting the mountains orange. His team pinned down, radios dead, air support hours away. And Mark, his younger brother, and shouting through the chaos, "Danny, get them out!" He remembered the moment the explosion came, the flash that ripped the world in half. And the last thing he saw was Mark pushing a wounded man behind a rock, before disappearing in a cloud of fire. Rourke woke up with a gasp, the echo of the blast still ringing in his ears. He sat upright, drenched in sweat, staring at the empty bunk across the room. He rubbed his face, whispering, "I left you there." He'd carried that guilt like a shadow for years. The Navy called it acceptable loss, but Rourke had never accepted it. When Cross knocked softly on the door at dawn, Rourke didn't hide the exhaustion. "Couldn't sleep either?" Cross asked, stepping in with 2 cups of coffee. "Not for a long time," Rourke said. Cross hesitated, then said, "You lost your brother out there." Rourke nodded. "He was a lieutenant too." "Like you." Cross looked down, the steam from the cup curling between them. "Then I guess I owe 2 apologies." Rourke managed a faint smile. "Just don't waste what you learn." "That's apology enough." They sat in silence again. The kind that says, "I see you." By week's end, the base received mail from Operations Command, routine packets, personnel notes, and 1 sealed envelope marked for CPO Daniel Rourke. Rourke took it to the break room, opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, handwritten, smudged at the corners. His heart stopped. The handwriting was familiar. It was from a local interpreter who had worked with them overseas. Someone Rourke thought had been killed in the ambush. The letter said he'd survived, and that a captured American officer had been found alive months later, taken north into the mountains. The name at the bottom made his hands tremble. Lieutenant Mark Rourke, confirmed survivor, location unknown. The words blurred as he read them again. His brother might be alive. He leaned back in the chair, chest heaving. Years of grief cracked open like glass under pressure. Cross found him moments later, letter shaking in his hands. "What is it?" Cross asked. Rourke looked up slowly. His voice was barely a whisper. "They found him." "My brother." "He's alive." The silence that followed wasn't disbelief. It was reverence. The kind that falls when life gives back something it once took. Rourke's eyes hardened with purpose. The kind that had once made him unstoppable. He stood, folding the letter carefully into his pocket. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "we're done teaching. It's time to go get him." Cross didn't ask where. He just nodded, because when a SEAL says we're going back, it's not a request. It's a promise. 2 days later, Rourke sat in the command office. The letter laid neatly on the table between him and the Master Chief. The old man read it twice, then set it down with a sigh that sounded like it came from a decade of holding things he couldn't fix. "You understand what you're asking, Chief?" he said quietly. "This isn't a confirmed operation. It's a rumor wrapped in hope." Rourke nodded. "Yes, Master Chief, but hope's the only thing that ever got anyone out of there." Cross stood beside him, stiff but resolute. "Sir, with respect, he's not asking to go alone." The Master Chief looked at them both. Two men on opposite ends of experience, now bound by something heavier than duty. "Unofficially," he said at last, "you didn't hear this from me, but if you're going to move quiet." That was all the permission they needed. That night, under a sky thick with stars, Rourke and Cross loaded into an unmarked C-130 headed east. The engines roared. The cabin smelled of gun oil and adrenaline. Cross tried to lighten the air. "You always this calm before a mission?" Rourke glanced over. "Calm's not the absence of fear, Lieutenant. It's the mastery of it." Hours later, over foreign soil, as the plane dipped into darkness, Cross finally understood what real courage looked like. It wasn't loud. It didn't flex. It breathed quietly and did what needed doing. Rourke checked his watch, his jaw set like iron. "We get in, we confirm, we bring him home." Cross nodded, eyes locked forward. "Aye, Chief," somewhere far below them, across a line the world had forgotten, a ghost waited to be found. They hit ground just before dawn. Sand and frost crunching under boots. Wind cutting through the valley like a knife. It had been years since Rourke had smelled that air, the same mix of dust and diesel that haunted his dreams. The two men moved in silence through the remnants of an abandoned village. Crumbled walls, rusted vehicles, the shadows of war long past. "This where it happened?" Cross whispered. Rourke nodded once, scanning the terrain. His hand brushed a wall pocked with bullet scars. "Right here," he murmured. Mark was standing where you are now. Cross looked around. The ghosts seemed to hang in the air. They followed the coordinates from the letter into the mountains. Every step felt like walking through memory. Each ridge a page from a chapter he thought he'd closed. Hours later they found what they were looking for. A cave, half collapsed, hidden by rockfall. Inside, old signs of life. Ashes, torn fabric, a carved name on the wall. Mark Cross's breath caught. He was here. Rourke crouched, running a calloused hand over the letters. His throat tightened. He was alive. They found tracks, recent. Smaller group, maybe 2 men. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Then the radio crackled. Garbled voices, foreign, close. Cross reached for his rifle. "Company." Rourke nodded, eyes narrowing. The stillness returned, the same calm that had silenced the gym. When the patrol rounded the bend, Rourke moved first, fast, clean, silent. It wasn't rage. It was precision. Minutes later, the valley was quiet again. Cross stared at him, chest heaving. You still fight like you never left. Rourke reloaded calmly. Some wars don't end, Lieutenant. They just wait. They reached the final ridge by sunset, wind whipping sand into their eyes. At the base of a jagged cliff stood a small compound, makeshift, half-buried, smoke curling from a barrel outside. Rourke peered through his scope. 2 guards, 1 generator, and in the center, a figure chained to a post, thin but alive. Cross whispered, "That him?" Rourke adjusted focus. The man lifted his head, long hair, beard, eyes hollow but unmistakable. Mark. Rourke froze. His hands trembled. All the years of grief collapsed into that 1 second. "We move," he said, voice steady despite the storm inside him. They waited until dark. Then silence fell, broken only by the crunch of boots and the metallic click of safeties switching off. Rourke led, every motion deliberate, as if each breath could decide the outcome. Cross followed close, covering the rear. The first guard dropped without a sound. The second turned, too slow. Within minutes, the compound was theirs. Rourke sprinted across the yard, heart pounding, falling to his knees beside the chained man. "Mark, it's me, it's Danny." Mark blinked through the blur. His voice cracked. "Danny?" Rourke tore at the bindings. "I've got you. You're coming home." Cross helped lift him, covering the exit. But as they moved toward the ridge, Mark coughed violently, blood staining his lips. "Danny," he whispered. "You shouldn't have come." Rourke's grip tightened. "Don't talk like that. You're gonna make it." Mark's gaze softened, the faintest smile breaking through the pain. "You always were the stubborn one." Gunfire erupted from the ridge, reinforcements. Cross returned fire, yelling, "We're pinned." Rourke pulled his brother close, shielding him with his own body. Some missions take everything you have. Others take what's left. The firefight roared into the night. Tracers slicing through smoke, bullets striking stone inches from their heads. Cross's weapon jammed. Rourke's didn't. Years of muscle memory turned chaos into rhythm, but there were too many. "Go!" Rourke shouted, shoving Cross toward the extraction path. "Get him out!" Cross grabbed Mark, dragging him toward the slope. "Not without you!" Rourke looked back, eyes fierce, resolute. "That's an order." Cross hesitated, torn between obedience and loyalty. Then Mark's voice, weak but certain. "Listen to him. He always finishes what he starts." Rourke turned, covering their retreat with brutal precision. Every shot a message. Not today. A blast rocked the ridge, sending debris cascading. When the dust cleared, Cross and Mark were gone from view. Rourke smiled faintly, chest rising and falling under the weight of spent ammo. He looked up at the stars, the same ones that had watched them as kids. "Got you home, little brother," he whispered. Then another explosion, a closer this time, threw him to the ground. The world dimmed to ringing silence. When Cross returned with reinforcements an hour later, the valley was still. They found Mark alive, barely conscious, and beside the shattered rocks, Rourke's dog tags half buried in dust. Cross knelt, eyes burning. "He stayed so we could leave." Mark reached weakly for the tags, holding them to his chest. "He promised," he murmured. And Danny never broke a promise. The wind carried the last echo of gunfire into the night, and with it, the sound of a quiet man keeping his word. The C-130 landed at dawn on the Coronado tarmac. The air smelled of jet fuel and ocean wind, the same mix Rourke had always loved. Only this time he wasn't on board. Cross stepped off carrying a single duffel. Inside, Rourke's gear, his tags, and a folded flag. Behind him, medics wheeled Mark toward the waiting ambulance. His face was pale, but his eyes, those same eyes Rourke used to steady his rifle, were awake. Reporters tried to close in, but Cross brushed past them. There were no statements, no medals, no fanfare. Just silence, the kind Rourke had lived in. The kind heroes never asked to be remembered for. Inside the hangar, Mark stopped the gurney. He looked at the Master Chief who waited there, hat in hand. "He saved me, sir," he said softly. "He saved us both." The old man nodded, his voice rough. "A SEAL's oath doesn't end with the mission, son. It ends when the job's done." Cross looked at the flag. "Then Chief Rourke's job is done." For a long moment no one spoke. The flag caught the wind, fluttering like a heartbeat. Weeks passed. The base went on. Drills, new recruits, the same sound of boots and orders echoing through corridors. Life continued, but something had shifted. Cross took over Rourke's class. He didn't shout anymore. He didn't mock. He just trained them. Steady, exact, with a quiet intensity that made the recruits uneasy at first. Then respectful. He'd catch himself repeating Rourke's words without meaning to. Calm isn't the absence of fear. It's the mastery of it. Sometimes he'd stop by the pier at night staring at the same black water. He'd toss a small stone and watch the ripples fade, like the echoes of a man's life reaching outward, touching things long after he was gone. Mark recovered slowly. The doctor said he shouldn't have survived, but Cross knew better. He'd been carried by something stronger than medicine, by the promise of a brother who refused to let him die forgotten. One evening, Mark walked down the pier where Rourke used to sit. He left a small wooden carving, a guitar hand-whittled and rough. "For you, Danny," he whispered, "for every song we never finished." The waves carried it away, glittering under the dying light. 6 months later, the new class of SEAL candidates stood lined up in the gym, the same place the story had started. Cross stepped forward, his uniform crisp, his voice steady. "Some of you think strength is about domination," he began, "that the loudest man wins, that the hardest punch proves you're right." He paused, scanning their faces. "But there was a chief here once, a man who showed us what real strength looks like. It's the kind that doesn't need to prove anything. It's the kind that stays calm when everyone else panics, the kind that stands between danger and the people who can't." He let the silence hang. The recruits listened. No smirks, no nervous laughter. Just attention. "And when that man was gone," Cross said, voice roughening, "he left behind something we can't teach, only live." He pointed to a plaque newly fixed to the wall. It read, "Go, Chief Daniel Rourke. Calm is the mastery of fear." Cross stepped back. "That's your lesson. The rest, you'll have to earn." That night the ocean was still. The moon hung low over Coronado, silver and soft. Beneath the pier the current shifted, carrying a fragment of driftwood, a weathered piece shaped like a broken guitar. Worn smooth by time, it drifted out toward open water, the same horizon where a SEAL had once disappeared. No trumpets, no headlines, just the sound of the sea keeping his memory, wave after wave, in quiet repetition. Because men like Rourke don't die in the stories people tell. They live in the silence they leave behind, and in the calm that follows.